Hey everyone, today as we continue along this journey, we're going to move into decimals as models. We've kind of been talking about place value a bunch, right? Like our whole idea of place value and how this works with whole numbers. Lately, we started to talk about these place value and values, well, mostly just place value with decimals, right? Like how we read and write decimals. We talked about those place values. So if I had like my ones place here, remembering the decimals were like parts of a whole or parts of the ones, if you will. And they had their names too. This was the tenths and the hundredths. So we kind of talked about that. We're going to talk today about like how do we model these. We did some reading and some writing of them. But we are going to talk about like how do we model and what do they look like? What is a tenth of something? What is a hundredth of something? Quick review though, if I had a decimal like this, how do we read it, right? That's kind of our goal. So remember I said if you can write it, you can read it, and if you can read it, you can write it. That's really what it comes down to. So this, if I look here, I have nothing in my ones place at all and a decimal, so I'm just going to read this number. It says 32. So if I was putting this in word form, I would say 32, and then I just read the last place value and it's in, and if you remember from what we saw, that's the hundredths place, so 32 hundredths. And again, they're called hundredths because 100 of them make one, and they're called tenths because tenths of them make one. And we talked a little bit about what that means with money. If you equate that to money, it can really help you out because you think about like hundredths are like pennies. It takes 100 pennies to make a dollar. This would be like 32 cents, right? But we are here today to kind of talk about how do we model these things? What do they look like? So I'm going to go ahead and start with this idea of a tenth. Let's just take any sort of one. Of course, first one I pick, I'm going to make a little difficult to draw, but that's okay. This is 7/10, right? So what does that look like as a model? Well, anytime I model something, I can just create a piece here. Wow. Okay. Can I? Let's try that again. I'm just going to go ahead and model out like a rectangle to the best of my ability. And again, when we're taking these pieces, we do want them to be partitioned equally. That's that whole idea, like all pennies are worth the same, right? One penny isn't smaller than another. So when we show these like models, we really want to try to partition each piece. So this means I have 7/10. Well, that tenths tells me that right away, my model itself needs to be broken into 10 pieces, right? It's 10 pieces that my whole is broken into because it takes 10 of these to make a whole. So here's my whole, and I'm gonna just go ahead and make that 10 pieces. So one trick I like to do is I like to think about making 5 pieces first. And if I'm gonna make 5 pieces, then you draw 4 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, see that? There's 5 pieces. And then I'm gonna cut those pieces directly in half. So that gets me 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's 10 pieces. Well, what does 7/10 look like? And for those of you that have done work before with like fractions, this looks a lot like fractions. And decimals and fractions are equivalent. They can mean the exact same thing. So if I have 7/10, I'm just shading in 7/10 of this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right? That's 7/10. That's what it looks like. Here's my whole again. It's cut into 10 pieces because we're working with tenths. And then, oh boy. And then I have 7 of them. So these 7 is what I shade in. So as always, let's just keep playing. Sorry, my screen's moving around on us. So let's play around with another one. Let's do 3/10. Okay, so if I wanted to model that first thing, what am I going to do? I'm going to create a nice little rectangle. I'm going to do my best. And then we're working with tenths, right? Because that's that place value. So I'm going to take this and partition it into 10 pieces. Again, I like to think about partitioning it into fifths, and then we kind of like cut those in half. And if I want 5 pieces, I draw 4 lines. And then we cut those in half, and I now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yes, we want these to look pretty darn close to being the same size. That would only be fair. It does not have to be perfect, but we can definitely try. I mean, I would agree a lot of these boxes are a little bit bigger than the other, and my line at the top isn't super straight. But for the sake of this, you know, we're going to just keep working through it. And so I have 3/10. So how many of these tenths, because each one of these equals a tenth, how many do I have to shade in? Well, 3. 1, 2, 3. So that's how I would model 3/10. And again, this looks really familiar to work we've done with fractions before. So I don't know. Let's do another. I'm always down. What do you say? 5/10? Great. Great idea. 5/10. All right. So again, we're working with tenths. So what are we going to partition or divide or cut our whole into? 10. You're right. 10 pieces because it's tenths. So we're going to do 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Ooh, I don't like that one. It does not look even. Uh-oh, I did that trick again. Excuse me here. Let's start over. Oh boy. All right, I'm on it. Here we go. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Each one of these is a tenth. Right? There's 10 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I have 5/10, which means I'm going to color in 5 of them. And there we go. There it is, right? And if we even look at this. This is kind of cool. I just realized this looking at it. Let's use another color here, right? This piece and this piece are the same. So really 5/10 is the same thing as half. It's half of it. But we can talk more about that as we go. So this is really helpful. Like these are what tenths look like. This is how we model it. So tenths is the first place value in the decimals that we were talking about. Well, let's play around with the hundredths. And this gets maybe a little messy. We're going to do our best with it. I'm not super worried, right? That's the whole idea about math as we go and we dive into it. So I'm going to start with what we see here is 13 hundredths, right? So now we're working in the hundredths. Well, that means if I'm going to model this, and as you can see, I'm definitely going to build a bigger model here. It doesn't change the value. Because my model is bigger, it doesn't mean my number is bigger, right? So keep that in mind. I'm just drawing a larger model because I'm going to need space, because if you are catching on, with tenths, we had to take our whole and cut it into 10 pieces. And with hundredths, I got to cut it into 100 pieces. So that's really what gets tricky. So I'm going to need 10 pieces, which means I'm doing 9. Oh boy. Okay. Let's see. Because I need 10, I need 9 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That didn't quite work. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Again, we do want them to be closer, but that's all right. So let's do another. Let's start to partition these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, that's 100 pieces, right? Because I have 10 on this side, and I have 10 on this side. And 10 times 10, if we're doing area, right, that's going to get me 100. So here's my 100 pieces. Well, now if I'm going to show 13 hundredths, well, how many of these little squares am I going to shade in? I'm going to shade in 13 of them, right? And here's a cool kind of fun trick is if we look, we know this is 10. This is a lot like a tenth. So I have 1/10. So I can just shade in this whole row here because that equals 10. And then I need 3 more. So 1, 2, 3. So that's what a hundredth would look like. Now, I showed tenths and I showed hundredths. And like I said, the hundredths look larger, but like I wanted you to realize that actually the size of your model doesn't always mean that you have a larger number or a smaller number. So I want to show what that looks like. I'm actually going to do 7/10. And then let's go ahead and take 24 hundredths, right? I'm going to model these both. I'm going to try to model them both at the same size so it makes sense. And this is where we can really start to compare. So I'm going to draw out a much larger model, but I'm going to draw them the same size, right? Roughly. Again, because the size of my model doesn't change the value of these numbers. It's just a way for us to think about what they look like. We're working in tenths here, so I'm going to break this into 10 pieces. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Boom, right? So there's 10. And then this is, we're working in hundredths, so I got to cut this into 100 pieces. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That gets me 10 pieces, right? You always do one less line than the number of pieces you need. And then we're going to go 10 pieces the other direction. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Ooh, that one's cleaner. I like this. All right, so same size model. Again, the size of your model doesn't change. It's really about how much you are shading in and looking at. So here's 7/10. So if we go over here, we have 10 pieces, or tenths. We need 7 of them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then if we look over here, we need to shade in 24 of these little squares. And again, this is my tens place. And so I know that one row of these is 10, right? So this would be, I could just shade in one of these rows. So that's 10, and then 20, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. And if we look at these two models, we kind of have to ask ourselves, like, which one of them has more shading going on? And that's something I want you to think about, because we're going to get into that in the next videos about values. Yeah, you're right. I shaded in 24 of these small squares, and I only shaded in 7 of these larger squares. But really, if you ask yourself, which one has more shading? So which one would be a larger number? And that's what I want you to be thinking about as we move on. So here you go. Here's some modeling. We'll continue to do all this stuff. So as I always say, do not stress it, but always ask questions. So post them in the Q&A section so that you know you can ask us what's going on and we can help you out from that. And let's continue to work together. See you soon.